Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wondered how a food bank could be a clue to hidden problems like gambling addiction? It sounds a bit unusual, right? Well, this new study dives deep into that exact question, exploring what can be found in a place you might least expect, and gives us a big hint about how we can help people facing tough times. So the big question this research tackles is pretty important. In places where people go when they're really struggling, like food banks, are there hidden issues out there that we're just not seeing? Specifically, they wanted to know if gambling problems were showing up in people who were already facing financial hardship, and if simple screening tools could help spot these problems. Gambling can be a huge problem, not just for the people who gamble, but for their families and even whole communities. It can lead to bankruptcy, broken relationships, and even thoughts of suicide. The tricky part is that these harms are often invisible. Unlike other addictions, there aren't always obvious physical signs. Plus, there is a lot of shame and stigma around gambling problems, making people reluctant to talk about it or seek help. This means people might be struggling with gambling harms, but showing up for help with other issues like debt or needing food without anyone connecting the dots. The researchers teamed up with a food bank and a money advice service in a really deprived area of northwest England. They decided to try out a couple of simple questionnaires given by volunteers to see if people accessing the service were experiencing gambling-related harm. One tool was a modified 3 question screener called the Lie Bet Debt questionnaire. It is super quick and asks things like, have you had to lie about how much you gambled? Have you felt the need to bet more and more money? Or has your gambling led you into debt? If someone answered yes to any of these, it was a sign of potential harm. They also used another tool, the PGSI Mini, which is a bit more detailed and looked at people accessing mental health crisis teams too. Here is what that Lie Bet questionnaire looked like. Pretty straightforward, right? The idea is that any yes response flags a possible issue that needs more attention. And what did they find? Well, it was quite eye-opening. Out of over 1,200 people who used the food bank and money advice service and answered the Lie Bet questionnaire, they found that over 3% reported experiencing severe gambling-related harm. Now, 3% might not sound like a lot at first glance, but in a population already facing significant hardship, this is a really substantial number. It means that gambling problems are indeed showing up in places where you might not expect them. Looking at the details of those positive screens, about half of the people who screened positive had actually answered yes to all 3 questions, and many had said yes to at least 2. This suggests that when gambling harms are present, they're often quite significant and often involve debt. They also used the PGSI Mini, and that showed similar patterns, with over 2% of nearly 2,000 people showing risks of gambling harm. Interestingly, when they asked about being affected by someone else's gambling, nearly 4.2% said yes. This highlights that harms are not just personal. What is really interesting is how many people were identified as at risk versus those experiencing harm. The data suggests that for every person experiencing severe gambling harm, there might be another person who is at risk of developing more significant problems. This is a classic public health challenge. This leads us to a really crucial point highlighted in the discussion. The study found that while people were identified as experiencing gambling-related harms, none of them accepted a referral to specialist support services. This is a big puzzle. They were signposted to help, and they continued to engage with the food bank or advice service. But they didn't take that extra step to get gambling-specific treatment. Why might that be? The researchers suggest it is likely due to that lingering stigma, shame, or perhaps they're not ready to face the issue head-on yet. Or maybe they don't see gambling as the root cause of their problems, focusing instead on the more immediate issues of food and debt. So, what does this all mean for us? This study powerfully shows that gambling harms are a significant but hidden public health issue, and they're more prevalent in communities dealing with financial stress than we might think. The key takeaway is that community-based settings like food banks are vital places for identification. Simple, volunteer-administered screening tools, like the Lie Bet Debt questionnaire, can be incredibly useful for spotting these problems early. Even if people don't immediately accept referrals, just knowing that an organization is aware of potential gambling harms can be a first step. It equips those organizations to better target support within their own settings and helps normalize conversations about gambling harms, which in the long run can reduce stigma and encourage help seeking. Now, every study has its limits, and this one is no exception. The research was primarily done in one food bank in a very deprived area. This means we can't say for sure that these numbers apply to every food bank or every community. Also, the initial Lie Bet Debt screener didn't specifically ask about worry for significant others gambling. meaning the impact of other people's gambling might have been missed. However, the researchers did mention that local adaptations have been made, like adding a fourth question about worries for someone else's gambling, which seems like a smart move. The study also touched on a small pilot with a mental health crisis team, showing a surprisingly high rate of potential gambling harm in that group too, suggesting that unidentified gambling issues can surface in acute care settings. This really emphasizes the need for early identification in community settings. The biggest challenge seems to be translating identification into engagement. The fact that no one accepted a referral initially is a concern, but the researchers are hopeful that ongoing implementation and normalization of conversations might improve this over time. They're seeing about 10 to 12% of identified individuals accepting referrals in a second year of the project, which is a positive sign. What I find so compelling about this research is its practical approach. It recognizes that many people seeking help are dealing with multiple interconnected issues. By equipping frontline workers in trusted community settings with simple tools to identify gambling harms, we're not just finding problems, we're starting to chip away at the stigma and build pathways to support. It is about meeting people where they are, understanding the complexity of their struggles, and offering a hand that might lead them towards a better future, even if they don't grab it on the first try. It's a reminder that sometimes the most profound insights can come from the most unexpected places, and that a little bit of awareness and a simple question can make a world of difference. So, what is your take on this? Do you think screening for gambling harms in places like Foodbanks is a good idea? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more fascinating dives into psychology and science. We'll see you in the next one.